there is a backstory here that many want to know about. Who was involved from the UAE? Who was involved from the administration on this side? Yeah. And who was involved at OpenAI?
Yeah, I think there's multiple sort of, as you're alluding to, streams that have come together here. First of all, OpenAI has been talking about this concept of how do we build democratic AI? How do we allow the fact that the U.S. is leading on the innovation to leverage that lead to begin to build democratic AI rails around the world? We've been having this conversation for more than a year, countries all around the world, including in the UAE. The new administration comes in, President Trump comes in. I think there's a real vision to have what I would sort of call a commercial diplomacy approach. That includes both how we can use our technology, again, to build these democratic rails around the world, but also as part of that to bring investment back into the U.S. And so with the president's trip last week to the Middle East, particularly into the UAE, I think that was really a catalyst, a moment to bring all of these different streams together. And, the administration was in the middle of really trying to forge and facilitate all of this. And ultimately what we're announcing today, I think, is really one of these win-wins, right? It's a win knowing that there are two countries in the world that can build AI at scale, the U.S. and China. We want as many countries as possible building on U.S. rails. So a win there, Chris, and a win for the investment back to the U.S. Sorry.
Can the UAE do it at scale? 5 gigawatts of electricity is an insane amount of power for a nation like the UAE. I'm just going to read this because I couldn't believe it. The International Energy Agency and its data show that the entire country generated 155,000 gigawatt hours of electricity in 2022. That's about 17.7 gigawatts in total. In other words, this data center will consume 1/3 of the entire country's energy. How on earth are they going to supply it?
So, Sam Altman, our CEO, has talked about the fact that as we move into this intelligence age being driven by AI, there will be two components that really drive this. Access to electrons, energy, and then how the innovation moves forward. Those two things really move in concert. Look, when you're talking about the UAE and we're talking about this particular facility, it's 5 gigawatts over a time period. Our particular piece and what we're really anchoring on is that we're going to do 1 gigawatt. And within that 1 gigawatt, about 200 megawatts, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit of details, but 200 megawatts coming online over the course of next year. So I think the way to think about this is it will likely go in a series of stages. What I think is really impressive and interesting about how we're thinking about this particular partnership is that we're going to bring AI to the entire nation, to the entire country. It's going to be accessible for its citizens. It's going to be used by the country to advance transportation, energy modernization, healthcare, education. So a really interesting way to think about it. And if you think of AI as almost a nation-building technology, right? Countries around the world understand that this is maybe our generation's equivalent of electricity. Again, two countries that can really provide it, the U.S. and China. And so there's an opportunity here to really work with these countries to create interesting models. We have Stargate in the U.S., which is our infrastructure project here in the U.S. We now have Stargate in the UAE. And, our hope and aspiration and plan is to begin to do this around the world. Right. In fact, Jason Kwan, our Chief Strategy Officer, is heading off to Asia next week for a series of conversations to build on this.
Are there one or two countries in Asia, Chris, that you're focusing in on?
I think when we look at Asia, right, we've talked about sort of stage one or initial stage of this, what we call OpenAI for countries. We're going to look at countries in Asia that I believe you would sort of put in the category of being historic U.S. allies, historic U.S. partners. Jason's going to be traveling into countries like Korea, Japan, Australia, Singapore, all places where we're going to be having those conversations. And I think as we get into those conversations, we will learn a lot more. To date, we've already had more than 30 countries around the world reach out to us to want to talk about OpenAI for countries. So there is great interest. And I do think what is going on here is that the world understands that we are in a moment, that there is an imperative to getting access to this technology. The U.S. does have the innovation lead right now. And can the U.S. leverage this lead to bring our version of AI, a democratic version, to the rest of the world, and as part of that process, bring investments back to the U.S. as well?
And what then, in terms of those investments in the U.S., is the limiting factor? If energy cannot be brought to bear of 5 gigawatts in the UAE. It certainly can't be here in the United States. What sort of time frame are we going to be able to have the infrastructure necessary to bring generative AI to the masses, to bring hardware, which you might be now teaming with Johnny Ive, to bring by 2026?
Yeah, so first of all, on the UAE question, having spent time there last week, I do think this is a country that has a real plan and a real strategy. So I am certainly confident that they're going to be able to get to where they want to get to. We feel a great deal of confidence in the ability to deliver on the 1 gigawatt that we've agreed to in terms of the data center. Now, just 2 weeks ago, I was in Abilene, Texas, where I was visiting one of our sites as part of U.S. Stargate. It's going to be over 1 gigawatt of energy. There are 3,000 workers on the ground, electricians, plumbers, metal workers, carpenters. Sometimes, apparently, the numbers increase, go from 3,000 to 10,000 workers on the ground there. Look, this is a country, the United States, that has a history of thinking big, acting big, and building big. And the conversations we're having on U.S. Stargate with other states around the country and Texas really has shown to us that there clearly is a path to be able to move forward in developing the type of infrastructure that we're going to need in the U.S. Yes, there are challenges, but I also think there's an understanding that we are in a global economic competition, that infrastructure is destiny. It's the key to the U.S. maintaining its lead. And so there is a lot of support and, dare I say, even energy behind getting access to that energy.